Hey everyone! In this video, I'll be discussing the use of Turbo for Super Mario Odyssey speedruns, specifically the longer categories. But we'll get to that in a bit. I'll cover the main reason why Turbo would be useful, as well as a few issues people have raised regarding its use. Let's start with what I consider to be the main reason to allow it, which is alleviating the potential of repetitive strain injuries, or RSIs. Prolonged video gaming sessions have been known to cause RSIs, and I've linked some resources in the description if you would like to research further. All Moons being a 7-hour plus run definitely qualifies as a prolonged session. Obviously, I'm not advocating for the abolition of All Moons, and I appreciate the partial relief that breaks already provide regarding stretching, restroom, and food needs. With that said, it would be nice to also take some stress off of the more strenuous parts of the run, which would definitely be jump and cap farming. For now, let's focus on jump farming. 10,000 total jumps are required in order to get a moon from Toadette. This is a non-negotiable part of the run. If you want that moon, you must jump 10,000 times. In a typical all-moon speedrun, we get nowhere near this number throughout the run and must resort to farming. Two such farming methods exist: shaking a controller in a 2D sub-area in Snow Kingdom, or spamming the jump button over and over again under the Odyssey. While this wouldn't be as much of a problem in short bursts, the longer you sustain such actions significantly increases the risk of RSIs. I'm talking about multiple minutes here devoted to shaking the controller at a brisk pace or spamming buttons as fast as possible. If we could just alleviate the repetitive stress of farming from the run, I believe that it would make the run significantly safer. Turbo would be one such way to do this. With the Turbo controller, all you need to do is activate Turbo and hold down the button until farming is complete. That's cheating! I hear you all yelling. Well, let's break it down. People point to speedrun.com's, or SRC's, general gameplay rules section, which reads, "The following examples are things generally considered cheating and not allowed for runs. Note that some games may allow things on this list. If it is explicitly stated in the game or category rules that it's allowed, then it's fine for that game or category. Turbo controllers or such with non-native functions are disallowed by default unless specified otherwise in a game's rules. Exception: TurboGrafx 16, which has native Turbo controller support." Currently, Super Mario Odyssey does not list any exceptions for Turbo, so Turbo is disallowed. However, if such an exception were to be listed, it would be allowed per SRC's own rule set. Turbo would completely undermine the current state of all runs! I hear you, and I think I have the perfect solution. I propose that we restrict the use of Turbo exclusively to dedicated jump and cap farming. While this would not alleviate all risk that comes from playing a game for 7+ hours at a time, it would take the edge off of the most strenuous parts of the run. Having it relegated exclusively to dedicated jump and cap farming would also keep the entirety of almost all categories completely unchanged, and only alter a very small element of the categories that require farming. When I say dedicated jump and cap farming, I mean farming that is solely dedicated to nothing but farming jumps or caps. This would exclude using Turbo while waiting for a boss's next phase, for example, or while riding a moving platform. To keep verification simple, I also suggest limiting dedicated Turbo farming to a single session for jumps and a single session for caps, but more on verification later. What you've been seeing so far is a representation of a typical jump farming amount in All Moons. This is what it would look like in a single session using Turbo. When done manually, this extended farming session puts quite a bit of strain on the player. It is exactly this type of segment that Turbo advocates are hoping to find relief from. The use of Turbo, even for just this single farming session, would help immensely in reducing the risk of RSIs. At top level, runners can find enough cap throws throughout the run to completely eliminate cap farming. The same can't be said about jumps though, with around 4,000 extra needed in a typical run. Let's take a look at how many jumps we're at. 3,987. It's about what we're looking for. Turbo would give an unfair advantage to those who use it, since mashing quickly is a skill that would be diminished by the use of Turbo. To address unfair advantage, I propose a click per second, or CPS, limit on Turbo, and I have an easy way to implement this as well. Let's take a look at snow farming first. The jump limit on snow farming is 15 jumps per second. If you shake hard enough and consistently enough, you should be able to get around 15 basically every time. Spamming buttons in this section will not yield higher results than this, so we'll use 15 jumps per second as a baseline. Farming under the Odyssey, however, allows for up to 20 jumps per second when done optimally. In testing out various turbo speeds, I was only able to achieve 15 jumps per second under the Odyssey though, with 15 CPS and 20 CPS yielding essentially identical results. This is not to say that a turbo controller could not exceed this limit though, which brings us to implementation. I believe that allowing turbo should be an easy, straightforward process for everyone involved, including the verifiers. As such, I suggest that when someone has used turbo for their run, that they mark a turbo option when submitting, similar to how choosing RTA or TA is currently handled. If turbo is selected, they will be required to list the starting timestamp and ending timestamp of any dedicated farm that uses turbo, just like is done for brakes when selecting TA instead of RTA. Also, like RTA versus TA, turbo runs should be identified as such on the leaderboard. For jump farm, the runner will be required to open their jump list at least twice during the farm, preferably once at the beginning and once at the end. This will allow the jumps per second to be calculated. Special thanks to Mini for making a tool for this process. A verifier will simply enter the time of the first jump, the starting jump amount, the time of the last jump in that sequence, and the ending jump amount for that sequence. The tool will then automatically calculate the jumps per second. If the jumps per second is over the limit, the tool will adjust the time to be as though the farm were done within the limit. It will then list a time that can be added to the end of the run to compensate. Let's say, for example, that someone's turbo can achieve 20 actual jumps per second. 4,000 jumps in this instance would take 200 seconds. Adjusted to 15 jumps per second, the same amount of jumps would have taken 266.6 seconds. The verifier would add 66.6 seconds to the end of the run to compensate. If the jumps per second is below the limit, no further action is needed. This way, anyone who is able to use their skill of non-turbo mashing past 15 jumps per second will retain the advantage that their skill provides. As for the actual cap amount, while I believe that 15 would be fair, as it would match the shake farm in snow, I do also believe that human error should be taken into account. No one can be expected to be able to extract the absolute perfect 15 over the course of jump farm every single time, so I suggest a limit of 14 jumps per second as a reasonable trade-off to account for human error. Across 4,000 jumps, the difference between 15 clicks per second and 14 clicks per second is about 20 seconds. I, for one, will gladly take this 20-second hit to account for human error if it means that I don't have to shake or mash. I think this is a more than fair solution that will not compromise the integrity of any run, will not grant an advantage for anyone using turbo, will not make verification any more difficult than brakes already do, will maintain a unified rule set across all categories, and will give the relief to those who choose to use it. The rule could read as follows. The use of turbo is allowed for the purposes of dedicated jump and cap farming exclusively. Turbo may only be used for a single session of each. A runner will be required to show their starting and ending farm amounts from Toadette's achievement list before and after each turbo farm. When submitting, the runner will be required to select the turbo option and list the starting and ending timestamps in the description, similar to how brakes are listed. A click per second limit of 14 will be in place for jumps and 6.3 for caps. Any turbo that exceeds these farm rates will have their farming time adjusted to these limits. We can discuss these limits further if you think they are unfair. As for cap farming, the cap limit is 6.6 clicks per second. Personally, I think that is a slow enough speed to consider the fast mashing skill as not needed. However, I also believe in accounting for human error. Therefore, I propose a cap limit of 6.3 clicks per second. Across 2,000 caps, that's a 15-second difference, which I think is more than fair, since anyone can achieve that mashing speed without the need of special techniques. If anyone disagrees, we can discuss further. I have also heard the argument that turbo is not a feature that is officially supported by Nintendo because Nintendo does not make any turbo controllers. As long as I can remember, growing up with video games throughout the 80s and 90s, turbo has been a standard control mechanic, not just for Nintendo, but basically across the board. Nintendo specifically, though, has officially supported turbo ever since their very first home console, the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. Two such official NES controllers that support turbo are the NES Advantage and the NES Max. Nowadays, the Switch has official controllers that support turbo, such as the HoriPad Turbo. While turbo is not baked into the console like it is on TurboGrafx 16, it is a function that Nintendo officially supports. Another argument that has been brought up is that turbo is essentially a macro. While turbo does automate some button presses to an extent, I think it is completely different from modern macro. For example, modern macro can automate multiple inputs in a predetermined, specific order with specific timings through a short press of a single button, while turbo, just like it has been for decades, can only alternate a simple on and off state for a single input at a set rate, only doing so for as long as the button is manually pressed. It is a simple function that game makers have relied on for decades, as they understood since very early on that mashing a button for extended periods is not great, to say the least. At the end of the day, those of us looking to use turbo do so not because we want an advantage, or want special treatment. We just want to make an already somewhat taxing and intense run a little less physically detrimental to our overall well-being. Hopefully, those who are against its use can still appreciate the value that we would find if allowed. Thank you for your consideration.